The tragic life of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom. Alice was the third child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. She was born in 1843. The name Alice was chosen by the Prime Minister at the time, Lord Melbourne. He had told the Queen that it was his favourite name, and so the royal couple obliged. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Alice was raised alongside her other 8 siblings. She had a series of tutors and governesses that looked after them all and ensured that they got the right care and education that royal children were privileged to. She grew close to her elder siblings, Vicky and Bertie in particular, and she was a caring young girl and had been well known for being the family's caregiver, which led her to eventually taking the role of caring for her dying grandmother. She would later take on the role of caring for her dying father also, as she took the brunt of the emotional turmoil in the family, as she became a shoulder to cry on for Queen Victoria in the following years after her father's death. This was a lot of pressure and emotional strain for one young woman to take on. She was the face of the monarchy while her mother hid away from the public for years. Alice got married during the depressing year of 1862, while the country and monarchy were still in mourning. The wedding was planned well in advance over a course of 2 years, and well before her grandmother and father's death, and so the Queen did not wish for the spectacle to be cancelled, as Prince Albert would not have wanted to hinder his family's joy in celebrating his daughter's wedding. The wedding plans had begun before a groom had even been chosen, and Alice's sister Vicky was given the role of conjuring up potential husbands that would be suitable to marry into the royal family. Prince Louis of Hesse had been chosen as the top suitor for Alice, and she and the family had grown fond of him when he attended the Ascot races in 1860. He was not the highest-ranking potential suitor as the nephew of the Grand Duke of Hesse, but he had impressed Alice and her parents enough to win his spot in the royal family. As a princess, the dowry that was given was extensive, and the marriage went ahead shortly afterwards on the 1st of July, 1862. An extravagant royal wedding had been planned, but due to the family's circumstances, the couple toned down the event out of respect of recent events, and so they only had a small ceremony at Queen Victoria's favourite royal household, Osbourne House on the Isle of Wight. Alice could not escape the brunt of the emotional turmoil of her family, not even on her wedding day. The day was described by Queen Victoria as being more like a funeral than a wedding, and she later called the day the saddest day she could remember. Not only was the wedding a disaster, it was also miserable and wet. And Ernest stepped in to give her away due to the passing of her father, which must have been very emotional not having him there, and the sadness over his absence took over the day. The married pair must have struggled to find an ounce of happiness on their big day, and she was only given a few hours in her wedding dress before she was forced back into wearing her mourning clothes. The married pair were extremely happy in the early years, despite the miserable carnage of their wedding day. They were able to enjoy their honeymoon before embarking on the rest of their lives together in Darmstadt in Grand Duchy of Hesse and by Rhine. Alice was welcomed into the country, but as royal brides that are sent abroad to live a totally new life, away from their entire family and everything they have ever known, she struggled to settle in. She was brought up extremely privileged, and she was not used to living at a lower standard of life. The married pair were given a repurposed home next to a busy street, and a much smaller income, which was a far cry away from her royal lifestyle in England. She chose to dedicate her time to charity work and studying art. In 1863, the couple gave birth to their first child, while away on a trip to witness the wedding of her brother, the Prince of Wales, and Alexandra of Denmark. This was quite special, as the baby was born in front of her grandmother, the Queen. And although the Queen was quick to judge Alice on her parenting style, as the young mother wanted to breastfeed her child, but Queen Victoria disapproved and was appalled. Alice ignored her mother and continued to parent her children how she saw fit. By 1874, the couple had 7 children: Victoria, Elizabeth, Irene, Ernest, Friedrich, Alex, and Marie. Alice continued to support numerous charities alongside being a loving mother. She was especially devoted to causes that benefited women. She used her passion and skill in caring to become interested in nursing, and she even befriended Florence Nightingale. This interest and natural passion was useful when Hesse was caught up in the Austro Prussian War on the side of Austria in 1866. This war led to Alice and her sister Victoria, the Crown Princess of Prussia, being set against each other as enemies. Alice visited the sick during the war, and the charities she had set up ran many of the state military hospitals. Hesse did not do well in the war, and the couple lost both wealth and territory, which really distressed Alice. All the while, her sister was celebrating Prussia's victory. Alice was to mourn another loss when her youngest son, Friedrich, tragically died when he fell from a window in May 1873. She had once been the emotional crutch of her family, but when she needed that crutch herself, there was no one there to help her, and she did not receive the emotional support she needed from either her mother or her husband. This is when the relationship started to suffer after many happy years together. As is often the case after a child dies, the couple will either get stronger or they'll fall apart. Alice and Louis's relationship was never the same after this, and so Alice threw herself into distraction with her charity work, focusing on social reforms and housing problems. In 1877, Louis's brother and father died quickly, one after the other, and so he gained the title Grand Duke of Hesse. Alice became the Grand Duchess, and the people of Darmstadt were delighted with her. She did struggle to take on this position, as the responsibilities put further strain on her emotional state. Alice started to make headway in transforming against the poor conditions in her realm, but ironically, it was during this time that her own household was struck down with an illness. All but one of Alice and Louis's children, in November 1878, had been struck down with diphtheria. Their 4-year-old child Marie died from the disease on the 15th of November. The other 4 children that were suffering with the illness continued to struggle to health. And as a heartbroken mother, she wrote to her own mother that the pain is beyond words. Alice then contracted the deadly disease when she was comforting her son Ernest over the death of his sister, and she kissed him. On the 14th of December, only a month or so later, on the anniversary of her father's death, Alice died. She had been reflecting on her father's death while in the grips of the disease, perhaps aware that her end was near too. Her final words were, "Dear Papa." Alice's sister Victoria was heartbroken over the death of her sister, but she was banished from attending the funeral due to tensions between the two nations. Queen Victoria outlived her daughter by 2 decades, and Alice had been her first child to die. Even after the deaths in the family, the heartache did not end there. Alice and Louis's daughters married into Russian royalty, which ended in tragedy for them both. Their daughter Alex went on to marry Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and Elizabeth married Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich of Russia. Both women were brutally murdered, by the Bolsheviks, and mercilessly, so were Alex's 5 children. This marked the end of the Romanov dynasty. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was one of the luckier descendants of Alice, and he was able to live out a long and happy life alongside his reigning wife of the United Kingdom, Elizabeth II. He celebrated 70 years of an alleged happy marriage, and he was able to live surrounded by his children and many grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. He was similar to Alice in that he was also dedicated to charity work and royal duties. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.